You're listening to the Teach Better Talk podcast featuring expert educators eager to share progressive tactics to reach more students. Teach Better Talk is created by teachers and fueled by passion. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 19 of Teach Better Talk. I am Ray Hewart, and as always, I'm with the pretty cool Jeff Gargis.
Pretty cool. Just
pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
You know, I have to say, we have so much in store for this episode. I'm so excited for the educator that we are featuring on episode 19. But before we get into all of the fun, Jeff, how are you doing?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. I'm super excited, really just pumped up. I'm always excited when we get to do podcast episodes. We're on episode 19, which is just crazy. And I say that at every episode. It's getting probably annoying for everyone, but it's just true. I love it. This is a lot of fun. Super excited. We've got the phenomenal Jimmy Casas with us today, who you may already know from him being a fantastic author. 3 fantastic books. What Connected Educators Do Differently, Start Right Now, Teach and Lead for Excellence, and then his latest, which is a best-selling book, amazing book, Culturize, Every Student, Every Day, Whatever It Takes. Prior to that, alongside of being an amazing author, 26 years in education, 22 years as a school leader, including 14 of those years as a principal at his high school, which was named one of the best high schools in the country 3 different times by Newsweek and U.S. News and World Report. 2012 Iowa Secondary Principal of the Year. One of 3 finalists for the NASSP 2013 National Secondary Principal of the Year. Has spoken at the White House. Is connected with the Future Ready Schools Pledge. I could keep going and going and going. Now Jimmy is an adjunct professor at Drake University. He's teaching courses in educational leadership and kind of building the future leaders of education, which is awesome. He's also the owner and the CEO of J. Casas and Associates. They do a ton of educational leadership, professional learning and services and for educators and stuff all across the country. So I feel like I could keep going and going like that, but I kind of want to get into the episode and first just say, like, Jimmy, thanks so much for taking some time out of your super busy schedule and hanging out with us a little bit. How are you feeling right now?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ray. I'm feeling great. You know why? Because every day I choose for it to be a great day.
Awesome.
So I'm doing fantastic, and I just feel very, very blessed each and every day. So thank you very much for asking.
Love it.
You know, Jimmy, let's talk about you for a minute. Jeff obviously went into like a great bio. I feel like you read his resume. Jeff, there's a lot going in there. But let's be honest, Jimmy. When someone comes up to you and says, hey, what do you do for a living? What's your typical answer?
Well, I used to tell them I was a principal, but every time I would say a principal, I'd get reactions like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Or, oh, that must be a terrible job. So eventually I had to figure something else out, right? So honestly, today, what I tell people, what I try to do is I see myself as a community builder. So I try to build communities, and where I really try to challenge myself is to try to build communities that currently don't exist. Because I think once you can do that, that entails bringing a group of people together and really sharing a vision of where you want to go. And then I often talk about how important it is at that moment to use what I believe are the 4 most powerful words in leadership, and that is, I need your help. And I think once we can begin to embrace that we don't have to have all the answers, and that leadership was never meant to be a committee of one, and that really in order to cultivate these cultures and really create these schools that are very high-performing schools where students are doing amazing things and staff is feeling jacked up every day that they can go and actually make a difference, then I think at that point we actually do something with that information. In other words, we take action, and hopefully what we're doing is that we're inspiring people to be more and do more than they ever thought possible. So I kind of see myself as a culturizer now. It's what I want to see myself as.
I love it. So I'm gonna take you on, since you brought the word in, and I want to talk about it. So culturize, use that word. That's the book, right? Can you give us sort of how did the book come about? What made you go this? And I know you've written a couple other books. They've done well. What brought Culturize around? That's one of your newest one. It's an amazing book. Like, what was it that I think he's just kind of led into a little bit of what led to, but what really made you say, I need to write this book. I need to get this message out?
Yeah, well, it actually came from a couple different sources. And one of those, first of all, I was blessed enough to be connected with 2 people that are very dear to me. One of those is Jeff Zoll, and one of those is Todd Whitaker. And both these individuals are people who had been down that road, who had written books, who had been successful as educators, but also as authors and as speakers. And so they actually, gave me the confidence in asking me to write a book with them. That's where What Connected Educators Do Differently came from.
Mm-hmm.
And then the follow-up to that was Start Right Now. And along those lines, they actually gave me the confidence that, perhaps that it could be a point where I could author a book by myself. And then prior to that, if I go back about 7 years, I was actually inspired and quite frankly challenged by a gentleman who actually eventually became a good friend of mine, and that's George Couros, who wrote Innovator's Mindset. And George was actually at that time, this was in Indianapolis where I'd met him, actually encouraged me and challenged me to start blogging. And so that's where my journey began in terms of trying to build confidence as a writer, because I never had confidence as a writer. And then through that blog, believe it or not, Dave Burgess actually was somebody who I admired also, not only as an educator, but as an author as well. And then I still remember Dave Burgess, who was, had taken time to comment on a blog and actually had written me a comment about my blog and told me how impressed and how he loved my story and how he loved my voice. And then one day out of the blue, he just called me and said, "You know what? I'd love you to write a book for me. I think you got a great story to tell, and I want you to write your manifesto for me." And so, which kind of freaked me out a little bit, because the thought of trying to write a book all by myself, I just knew how challenging it was to try to write a book with two other authors.
Yeah.
But now to try to do that by myself. But fortunately, I was surrounded by people who encouraged me and quite frankly gave me the confidence that I thought I could do it. So honestly, I just tried to write my story. I just tried to tell the story of my own personal experiences, relate that to the work that I did and the experiences that I had as a school leader, and then try to write my story in there to try to bring that voice to life.
I love it. I appreciate you sharing that with us. That's great. And I love to hear the connections and how I think it's important for people to realize that you needed that time to and that encouragement to build that confidence. Because I think so often teachers can look at someone who's had success and done well in an author like that and think, oh well, Jimmy's just probably always had that and done really well. So I love that you shared that little insight into the fact that you needed that confidence builder. That's an awesome thing.
Well, and we talked to a lot of teachers that really need that push.
Mm-hmm.
They really need to be challenged by the educators around them. I mean, all great educators that are out in the field right now need to keep their learning growing, right? It's not, you don't get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm done, I'm good enough, right? So being able to have people around that are challenging you, I mean, that's the goal.
Absolutely.
Right. And not just challenging, right, but also offering some support and the words of
Yes.
encouragement, and also, quite frankly, some practical ways on how to do it. In other words, help develop your skill set to do that. So, because I'll be honest, to write to me is a struggle. It's actually grueling. It's agonizing. I do not enjoy the process at all. It's very difficult for me to get myself to the point where I can actually even begin to put words down on paper, in this case on a computer. But I'm telling you, when I'm done, I feel great, right? I feel awesome, like a sense of accomplishment. But man, the process of going through that is sometimes really grueling. And I do think that sometimes people think, oh, well, you're an author, so you must love writing or you must be really good at it. No, and no, not at all. So I think there's a lot of people that kind of feel that way. So
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so I just try to encourage people, remind people, like the advice that George gave me is like, just write like you talk, right?
Yeah.
Write like you talk and write for you. That's the most important
That's
thing.
awesome. And I want to highlight something you said there, because I think it was really awesome about you said you need the people that challenge you, but also that offer that support and practical ways of doing it. I think that's a huge thing when it comes to like mentorship or leadership. Is it's one thing, yeah, you need to challenge your team and challenge the people that you're around, but you also need to provide that support. You need to find the ways to help them do that. You can't just challenge them and leave them to hang. Because like you said before, it's not in a leadership role. It's not just a one-man team or a one-woman team. It's a community. So I love that you said that. So now let me flip. 26 years experience, a few different roles, a lot of different experience, a lot of cool successes, 3 books, all this stuff going on for you. I've got to imagine there's been some slip-ups along the way. There's been some challenges along the way, some roadblocks along the way. So can you tell us about a time that you've had a failure? Sort of take us there with you. What was it that happened? Why was it a failure to you? What did it make you feel like? And then how did you come out of it? How did you overcome that? And what did you take away from it?
Yeah, so I think one of the first experiences I had where I failed right away. And honestly, the reality is this: I think all of us in this profession, I don't care what the profession is especially as the profession of an educator, I think we're always evolving. I don't think we ever get there. And I think for people who think, oh, I got this figured out, I don't think so. I think the variable of children is always changing. It's so unpredictable that I think once you think you have it figured out, I think another challenge comes along that you've never seen before. And so we're always trying to figure that out. But, if I go back to my first experience as a classroom teacher, I mean, I moved to Milwaukee Public Schools because I want to work with minority kids. I want to work with poor kids. I wanted to work with kids because I felt like I had something to offer because I didn't have a good school experience myself and it wasn't very positive. That I wanted to become an educator because I didn't want other kids to have the same experience as I did. I wanted to have a better experience, and I thought I could make that impact, right? And so I wanted the challenge. I wanted to go to the inner city, but honestly, looking back, I just wasn't prepared for that at all. I was way in over my head. I was a little naive going into that situation, but I was blessed again to be surrounded by people that were wonderful mentors that were great at what they were doing. And I just fell into the trap again of being challenged to the point where I just didn't have the skills, or was I even ready to understand the challenges that I was going to be facing working with kids who at that time, we call it trauma today, but were truly traumatized. And so I had a young boy in my class. His name was Michael, and I just struggled with him. I struggled with him every day. And so it got to the point one day where I just completely lost my cool with him and just got very frustrated with him and basically threw him out of my class and told him that he wasn't coming back. And I remember going down to talk to the assistant principal at the time. His name was Larry Leonard. And he was sharing with me, just reminded me that, I remember him saying, take a couple deep breaths, it'll be fine. We'll work through it. And, I just want you to, go back up to class, let this go for right now. We'll come back and we'll revisit it and we'll figure out what we need to do. And I just remember being very frustrated at that. I actually remember not feeling supported by my administrator because I really felt like he wasn't taking me seriously. But bottom line is, he did remove Michael from my class for a few days, which again, as a young teacher, I'm thinking, I feel supported. No, that was what they should have done, right? We can't have kids disrespecting teachers and talking to teachers like this and all these kinds of excuses that I was giving myself because I was frustrated with a young boy that I knew I wasn't reaching. And quite frankly, feeling guilty probably because he reminded me a lot of myself. And yet here I was going through similar experiences. And now as the adult and as the teacher, I was allowing myself to fall back into a situation where I didn't want to be that type of person. And so that was actually my first home visit that I made was with Larry Leonard. And I remember going to that home and thinking, oh my goodness, the environments that our kids are coming from. And I had no idea. And then listening to that story and having Mr. Leonard sit and visit with the grandmother of this young boy and not realizing until after I had left, but I was watching the relationship between this grandmother and Mr. Leonard and watching how they greeted one another, how they embraced one another, how she said, oh, it's so good to see you, Mr. Leonard. Like they truly had a relationship. And then I remember leaving and trying to figure out, well, where was Michael's parents? We'll find out that Michael's father was imprisoned and he never had a relationship with his biological father because he never knew him. But the heartbreaker for me was when I found out when he shared with me that the reason that he lived with grandma is because Michael, unfortunately, had been involved in a situation where he was playing with matches in his house, and the house eventually caught on fire, killing both his mother and two of his siblings. And that just changed everything for me because I just felt like I had failed and I'd let this young boy down because how was it possible that I had this young boy in class and yet I didn't know his story? And yet it was such a horrific story that I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to have to carry that the rest of your life, that you were responsible for the death of not only your mother, but two of your siblings. And then we wonder why this poor young man is so traumatized that school is not his priority and school is not, not the most important thing to him. And yet, more importantly, I never took time to really get to know this young boy. So it taught me a very valuable lesson right away from the very beginning. And that's where the whole idea of becoming a champion for kids comes from, because that means getting to know our kids and holding them, regardless of what all their personal tragedies and the struggles they go through is. I still believe we have to hold our students to the highest of expectations, because that to me is the equity piece, right? If we're going to expect kids to go out in this world and do great things, that I believe that we have to set them up for success. And the way we do that is to continue to hold them to high expectations, but then provide that care and that love and that ongoing support, and hopefully help them in developing their skills and their confidence and getting them to the point where they believe that they're actually capable of achieving these goals.
Well, that was an amazing story, Jimmy. I really appreciate you sharing that. That was, that got me, like my heart, like I'm feeling it, like goosebumps going on. And I really appreciate that, the depth you went into there. So now let's flip it around. Can you talk to us about a success that you've had? And you've had many, and there's a lot of that you can choose from, but Can you pick one that sticks out in your head? It can be a big one or a small one. But what was it that happened? Why was it a successful moment for you? And then what did you take away from that success?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll share the idea. So I was in 3 school districts. I worked in 3 school districts in my career in those 22 or 26 years as an educator. And, they were all a little different, right? I started, like I said, my career in Milwaukee Public Schools, inner city, and then I went to a school in Iowa City, Iowa, which was a very diverse population of students. It had everything from students who, quite frankly, were very high achieving students because their parents were professors at the university to they slept in a car last night, right? And so hadn't eaten for days or whatever happens to be the case. So a very diverse spectrum of students that were coming to us. And then, of course, my last stop was in Bettendorf, Iowa, and at a high school there, about 1,600 kids, 1,550, I think to be exact. And yet, when I walked in there, I had grown up about 30 miles from this community, and forever, Jeff and Ray, this school was considered one of the best schools in the state of Iowa. Traditionally, had been one of the top 3 schools forever. A strong tradition of excellence, facilities that were unbelievable, high achieving school, all the reasons why it was considered truly like the Taj Mahal of schools. And so when I had the opportunity to go there and become their principal at the age of 34, I felt like, wow, I've achieved that success of being able to lead a school that many consider the best school in the state of Iowa. And so the thing that was interesting, though, is when I went in there, is it taught me something, and that is oftentimes when people are in an environment, they see that organization or they see that environment through one lens only, and that's the only lens they've ever known. And so what can happen with that is you can get quickly very tunnel vision, and you can begin to believe in your own successes and not realize that perhaps your success isn't exactly what you think it is. It's because you don't have any other experiences to compare it against. And because I had been in 2 other school districts, when I'd gotten there, I shared this with them, and I didn't share it in a way because I wanted to be, disrespectful. I didn't want to be mean about it. But the reality was, it didn't take me long to figure out that this culture was as strong as it was really more about because the students that went to that school came from families that were very supported, very educated. They had the resources. The students had the support. And quite frankly, the students were going to be successful regardless. Now, that doesn't mean they, certainly weren't being taught and they weren't being challenged. I don't mean it that way. But what I mean is that the culture of that organization, in my opinion, at the time going in 2002, was truly a culture that was built around the adults. It was truly an adult-centered culture. It was about the adults. It wasn't about the kids. And the kids, quite frankly, fell in line and they complied. And, they were nice kids, so they just did what they were told. But what was happening was, at the time, the information that I had received going into that position was that the demographics of that community were going to be changing. And although they weren't significant like an inner city school, they were significant for a community that wasn't used to that type of demographic population. And so to have a shift like that, where you were going to, not only double, but quite frankly, triple the size of your low SES students, in other words, your low socioeconomic students, that was going to be a shock, not only to the community, but also to the teachers that were working with kids, because they weren't used to working with students who were reluctant, used to working with students who were struggling, used to working with students who perhaps maybe school wasn't their priority. They had other priorities like surviving. And so knowing that, the biggest shift that we were going to have to make was, how would you move that organization from an adult-centered culture truly to a student-centered culture? Because if not, then what was going to happen is you were going to continue to be overall successful as a student or as a school. But unfortunately, we weren't going to be talking about every kid anymore. We were just going to be talking about most kids. And if we were really going to make an impact on every child every day, and whether or not we were willing to do whatever it took, and that's where the idea that comes from, that book, is that we were going to have to make some significant changes, because we couldn't be satisfied with, a 94% graduation rate, because that meant 6% of the kids weren't graduating. And if you do the numbers, that means every year out of our school is walking 80 kids that aren't graduating. And what are the 80 kids that we're going to pick that aren't going to finish school? And so it's truly moving that needle from an adult-centered to a student-centered culture. And I think we were able to do that. And I feel very proud of that. And I think looking back, if I talk to people about what's one accomplishment, it was able to work with a staff who, I give them all the credit, because that's not easy to do, but for them to begin to eventually see themselves as truly champions for all kids, and also be willing to do whatever it took to move that organization to be successful. I'm just really proud of that, because we have adults now that put really the needs of kids first. And that's something that they should be proud of. And it's certainly something that I'm very proud of for the efforts that they give to make that happen.
Jimmy, I've been doing a lot recently, podcasts and books on personal growth. And the biggest elements that I've been looking at with that, it really comes down to being able to reflect. And so many of your stories, your Michael story, your student-centered story has to do with educators really taking a step back and reflecting on their own practice, reflecting on their language, reflecting on what their classroom culture feels like, what their school culture feels like. I mean, that ability to really sit back and reflect on your practice and make a plan to move forward and do it more effectively the next time is something I'm not only seeing as a common theme within our conversations here, but really something I'm seeing within our educational network that we've built right on Twitter, on, all the social media, being able to work with teachers. Teachers are really becoming conscientious and reflecting constantly. And it really gets me excited about where education's going. And so what is something you're excited about right now in education or what we're doing?
Yeah, I think it goes a long way with what you just said. It's interesting you say that because, as I said before when we first started this podcast, is that the reality is that we're never going to have this job figured out. The variable is always changing, especially when you're dealing with kids. And so I think it's dangerous to get to the point where you think, oh, we've got this figured out. If we just do this, this will happen. Well, it might happen with that child, it might happen with that child, but it doesn't work with this child. So what are we going to do differently? So I think the idea, especially in the work that I do now, part of the work is how do we get people to begin to think differently? How do we push their thinking? See, I tell people I used to try to change people's behavior, and then I quit trying to do that. And what I try to do is through questioning, through challenges, is try to challenge people to begin to challenge their thinking. Because what I want to do is I want to influence their thinking, because by influence their thinking, my idea was that they would change their own behavior, right? I don't want to change their behavior. I want them to change their behavior, because to me, that is sustainable. And so in order to do that, we sometimes have to push people to a point where they feel a little uncomfortable, but hopefully not offend them. And I think that's the challenge we always have. But I think if we can do it in a sincere and a genuine way, I think people will give us a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that when we are doing that, it's really coming from a good place. Because, Ray, we know that without reflection, there is no growth, right? So that's the only way we can get better, is we got to constantly be going back and revisiting the work we've done. And how could we do it differently? What was the outcome? Was it what we expected it to be? What were the good things that came from it? What were some things that we still are struggling with? And are we willing to own that and just be really transparent and be vulnerable in our work that we do with kids? So I get excited about that too. And so when I think about our profession, I think that is the thing, right? Social media, things like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all these different tools that came to us, I think came at the right time, is to allow us to be able to share our narrative, to share all the great things that are happening in our schools. And I think if we went in this profession because we wanted to make an impact, then I think we have to take advantage of the tools that are available to us in 2018 to make the greatest impact that we possibly can. Not just make an impact, but make the greatest impact. So, Simon Sinek talks about all the time about the importance of connecting the dots, and I agree with that. The problem is we can't connect them if we don't have more dots. So what are we doing to collect the dots? And I think the more we collect the dots, and I think that's what the whole idea of a personal and professional learning network allows us to do, is that we're always out trying to collect these dots. That's, to me, building the community. But then in order to really make that community strong and cohesive, we have to then connect them, but we have to collect them first. And I see that's what social media allows us to do.
God, I love that analogy. It's never been explained that way before. I love that picture that you just painted. I have a student teacher right now, Jimmy, in my classroom she's from Illinois State University. She's doing the year-long student teaching through the PDS program. And she is, truly, she's phenomenal. Like, if you graduated her tomorrow and put her in a classroom, she would do really well. And I love seeing those educators that are entering into the field that have the passion, have the fuel, because then when they get into the classroom, I don't know that I've ever spent so much time reflecting as I have with this girl, because she is so confident in her ability, but then so humble after a lesson that she comes back and she's like, all right, let's tear it apart. Let's reflect on every single element, how I can do it better when I teach it again in 15 minutes. It's such a learned practice. It's something that we have to be so purposeful about, is ensuring that we're reflecting. And I really love that about her. So as I then relate that to the new teachers in our field, right? The new teacher that just started their school year this year, or maybe they're about to start, or maybe they entered a new building, but they've taught for a few years in the past. what is one of your biggest pieces of advice for those educators to really ensure they thrive in this field?
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that's been your experience. And so let me say this first before I get into that question. But just one little piece to that is this: is that I love what you just shared, Ray. But you know what my biggest fear is that this young lady who has all this passion, has all these skills that already you deem as excellent. I just hope that we surround her and we create an environment where she's able to not only maintain and sustain that excellence, but that she continues to get better. And I
Yeah.
think that's the challenge that we have for our school leaders and for our school cultures is, are the people that are coming into the organization who come in with this passion and these skill sets, do we have a process in place? Do we have a framework in place? Do we have a system in place that will continue to allow these individuals to continue to grow? Because nothing breaks my heart more than watching people who come into this profession ready to change the world, and 2 or 3 years later are already looking to leave the profession. And so
Ugh, I
what
know.
happens? What happens, right? So to me, what happens is we're not creating the organizations, we're not cultivating the cultures where these people feel valued, where they feel appreciated, where they're challenged, they begin to use their skill sets and continue to grow and get better. So I'm great. I'm so glad to hear that. I just hope that she ends up in an environment that's going to allow her to continue to grow and get better. But if I talk to her today, you know what I'd say to her is, number one, always remember that you are a leader, that you don't need a parking space. You don't need a nameplate. You don't need a title. You don't need an endorsement, a degree to lead. You just need to lead. And the way you do that is you lead by example every day. You lead by example. In other words, you come in every day and you model the behaviors that you want to see repeated. So as a classroom teacher, you're going to model the way. You're never going to ask kids to do what you're not willing to do yourself. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say to her is understand that there will be moments where this job gets really difficult, and there will be moments that you begin to second guess and question even your own skill sets and whether or not you can actually do this job. And it's in those moments that you have to remember how important it is to continue to surround yourselves with excellence, surround yourself with people who are just as passionate and who truly believe they can make an impact, just like you believe you can make an impact today. And I believe that the key to that is to recognize that every one of us, and I would tell her this, that she's responsible for her own morale. Quit putting that on other people, quit putting that on the principal. And we as school leaders have to quit putting that on our superintendents, that every one of us is responsible for our own morale. The day will be whatever we want it to be, so go make it a great day. And I get concerned about people who begin to blame others for the way they feel about their job and their profession. And I think it's a cop-out. I think we have to own that ourselves. And I understand there are people who can make work environment difficult. I understand there are bosses that are not as effective as others. But at the end of the day, guess what? You still get to control your behavior, your mindset, your attitude. When you go into that classroom every day, we have to be there and ready to give our best to kids. The next thing I would say is just to remind her how important it is that we continue to invest in others. And that to me is the relationship, that the focus is always going to be what is the most significant way to impact the life of a student and to impact student achievement is to make sure that we're focusing on what I call the 3 R's. It's the relationships, relationships, relationships. But we also have to remember the point of it being the investment of time. So it's those 3 R's plus what I call TI, time invested, is going to be the key. In other words, to make sure that we're focusing on those relationships, getting to know the kids, getting to know their stories. And hopefully by doing that, it'll allow us to empathize with our students so we can be the best teacher that we can possibly be.
Wow. I don't care whether you're a first-year teacher or a 40-year veteran. That was just absolute gold right there. I love everything you just said. I really love the owning your own, like your own morale and like how you're feeling. And I want to like bring that back to right when we started and I asked how you were doing, and you said, I can't remember exact words you said, but you said, I'm doing great because I woke up today and chose to have a great day. And like that's such a big piece. There's so much stuff going on, but like you said, in a variety of different ways, like you're going there for the kids. You have to understand what they're coming in from and what they're dealing with, and you need to wake up every morning and decide that I'm gonna have a great day today because I'm going to do the work today into my passion to change lives, and I love that. It's fantastic. So
well, think about that, Jeff. I mean, I just drove 4 hours from northern Wisconsin through the worst traffic in Chicago.
Oh.
I walked in literally within 2 minutes, jumped on a Zoom session with a college, did a Zoom session there for 45 minutes, got done, jumped on with you. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh, Jeff, I'm so exhausted. I'm so tired. It's been a terrible day. And you know what? You don't really care. What you care about is, hey, we asked you to come on the show. We need you to bring your very best because this is our show, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's my responsibility, right? Is I need to come in there and give you my very best, because that would be pretty disingenuous for me to ever expect you to give me your best, and yet I'm not willing to do that for you. So that's how I see it.
I love it, and we appreciate that, and we do the same, and we do these recordings after a full day, putting it in, and it's
Absolutely.
because we're trying to do the best we can, because it's that community. We're all trying to come together and do everything we can to help each other do more and reach more kids and help more students grow. So loving it. So let's have a little bit of fun here. If you're ready to have some fun, I'm going to throw 6 questions at you. You're going to try to answer them in 15 seconds or less.
Gotcha.
It's not easy, and Ray's nervous. Ray's always nervous right now.
All right.
I'm already nervous.
I'm calling it right now, Ray. He's got this. It's. I'm calling it. Jimmy, don't make me a liar.
That's like you gave me a little forewarning, so I'm prepared, I think.
All right, here we go. What is one ed tech tool you cannot live without?
Right now, it'd be Voxer.
Love it. What's a book that you're reading right now?
It's actually a book that's not published, but it's going to be coming out. I've got the manuscript. It's called Reclaiming Our Calling. It's by the principal Brad Gustafson out of Minnesota.
Nice.
So I hope people purchase that book when it comes out.
Do you know when it's coming out?
I don't, but I'm going to guess right now the timeline's got to be probably February or March.
Gotcha. Loving it. Who do we need to follow on Twitter today?
I'm going to go with Weston Kieschnick. He is the author of Bold School. But the reason I want to give a shout out to my guy, because he's a Bettendorf grad. So this guy's amazing.
Love it.
I also want to say LaVonna Roth. She's an amazing educator out of Florida. So if you've never had a chance to hear her speak or follow her work, Shine, she's amazing. So LaVonna Roth, at LaVonna Roth, or Weston Kieschnick. Awesome.
And best blog or website for educators?
Right now, I got to go with George Couros. I mean, that guy continues to pump them out, and he just does wonderful work, and he's always pushing people's thinking, and he's created such a following. So I'd say George Couros. He's amazing.
Love it. Give us one daily, weekly, or monthly routine that every teacher should get into.
I think we should get into the routine that every day we walk into our school buildings or our classrooms, we should walk in like it's the first day of school. We should bring that energy, that passion, and that attitude and mindset that I'm here to change the world today. Every day should be like the first day of school, in other words.
Love it. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I'd have to give my father that credit. My father used to say, Jimmy, make hard work your passion, because then it doesn't matter what you choose for a career, you'll be successful. And then the second piece of advice he'd always tell me is, when you walk into a room, you make sure when you leave that room, you leave it with more energy than when you found it. Because his take on it was, as a Latino growing up in this world, that it sometimes wasn't going to be kind to us, and we had to do everything we could to make sure that we were memorable, that people wouldn't forget about us. So that's my father's wisdom.
Fantastic. That's high wisdom. Fantastic advice. Awesome. And other awesome. I think you did it, Ray. I mean, I didn't have.
He did. I was watching the clock.
I didn't have my stopwatch, but I think you nailed it, Jimmy. That was awesome. Appreciate it. It's good work.
Jeff, don't lie. We all know you had your stopwatch out.
I did not have the stopwatch out. I do have the trophy over here. I'll send it out.
Well, Jimmy, I have to say, I was so excited to talk to you. I've been following you for a long time. I'm a huge fan. I know that's dorky to say, but it's just the reality. And the final question has to do with our listeners. I really want to make sure that they're able to connect with you, because there's already so much value you've been able to provide in this podcast. I want to make sure that their learning starts here, but doesn't end. So how do people stay connected with you?
They can follow me on Twitter, obviously, at Casas_Jimmy. They can follow me on Instagram at Casas_Jimmy, or they can follow me on, let's see, what else is available? Voxer at Casas_Jimmy. So I try to make it real simple, the same handle for all of them. My website is jimmycasas.com, so they can get some more information on me. Or if they want to follow like my Facebook page, they can do that at Jimmy Casas Culturize. So those are some ways that people can reach out and connect with me. But again, just appreciate the opportunity to connect with anyone at any time. So hopefully people reach out if they're interested and want to chat. I'd love to connect. So thank you for asking.
Awesome. And you guys listening, you can always find all of those links. We'll link everything we talked about, all the resources and the people and that everything Jimmy's referenced in this episode over at teachbetter.com, as well as the really important links for connecting with Jimmy. And we'll link all of his books and everything he's got going on as well. So make sure you head over to teachbetter.com for all of that. Be sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any more of the upcoming episodes. And if you can give us a rating and a review, we'd really appreciate that as well. Jimmy, truly an honor to have you on, and really appreciate you taking some time and hanging out with us and sharing your stories and your father's wisdom, and just having some fun with us too. We really appreciate your time, and and hopefully we'll get to connect again soon and do it again.
Jeff, Ray, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Like I said, I feel very blessed, and now I feel like I've connected with 2 more people. So thank you so much for reaching out. It means a lot to me.
Awesome. And until next time, guys, let's get out there and let's teach better.